Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all for making the time to be here. It's an absolute pleasure to have you all online with me today. My name is Pip. I am the founder of Premier Team Building. I'm very fortunate to have you here with me for today's masterclass of the ecology of culture. I've got this webinar being broadcast to a few different locations today. So welcome everybody who's currently here on Teams and those on the other platforms where this is being shown as well. So without further ado, I will get started on today's masterclass out of respect for all of your time. Bear with me here. It's getting all my cameras and everything set up. Fantastic. So today is all about the ecology of culture. Now, for those of you who have yet to have the pleasure of meeting myself, my name is Pip, and I'm the founder and director of Premier Team Building. And the ecology of culture is a topic which I've spoken about at previous conferences around Australia, and it's a session that we run for many organizations around Australia. Typically, this is a topic we do over 2 to 3 different days. And we do our best to get everything we can in this masterclass, but it is going to be quite high level. So I appreciate all of you following along. At any time, feel free to pop any questions you have within the chat box for us today. Now, just keep in mind that today's masterclass is being recorded. So if you choose to unmute yourself or use your camera at any point, keep that in mind. We might do some breakout sessions, just depending on how we're going for time today. But also this is recorded, so all those who are in attendance or those who have registered to come along, they will also have the opportunity to see this recording at a future time as well. Beautiful. So the ecology of culture. This is a topic that I've been developing for many years now, and it's all about the correlation between science of the outdoors and culture within businesses or within teams themselves. So it does play a very important role within business and within personal lives as well. But I believe it's only fair and important that I educate all of you a bit about my history, about what qualifies me to talk about culture to this degree, and where this love and passion for the science of culture and the science of outdoors stems from, so you can follow along with my journey. So for myself, I am Canadian. It's why I speak a little bit funny. And when I was very fortunate at the start of my culture journey, I started going to summer camps. In North America, summer camps are a very big part of our summer holidays. In Canada, North America as a whole, we do have roughly 2 months of uninterrupted time to go to summer camps. This is where I learned all about going to this topic. And so I learned all about culture. And I also spent many years going to play in sports teams where I learned the value of collaboration and working towards greater goals. And as my goals continued on throughout that time, I was part of a summer camp staff. I started working there, and I was also part of the lifeguard team as well. So teams from a very young age were a very big part of what it is that I did. As I progressed, I became one of the junior outdoor education teachers. I was actually teaching outdoor science to schools, universities, corporate groups, and having them understand the values of the natural world, and also correlating that to business and their personal development itself. Then I went off to university where I deepened my studies within the world of outdoor sciences, in particular outdoor education. It was starting this period here where I really began to understand the correlation between outdoor sciences and culture. And as we dive into this topic, we'll really see how these two topics cross-pollinate and how they support one another, and where the correlations truly lie. And after university is where I truly defined the topic of the ecology of culture and started to educate people around this space within, corporate spaces, schools, and sporting organizations. Then eventually moving my way through the career path, I ran outdoor education centers and summer camps for years. So I was an adventure guide as well. then moved to Australia, and eventually launched the creation of Premier Team Building, where we continue to develop culture and where we support individuals looking to strengthen their cultures within their sporting teams, their corporate entities, or their personal lives as well. So feel free to pop it in the chat, but I would love to know, what is culture? Does anyone have any feedback about what culture is to them? I'd love to hear what your opinions are of culture. Feel free to pop it in the chat if you can do so. And what I'll be doing at this point in time as well, within the chat box, I'm going to drop in a file as well for everyone, a little workbook that everyone can take home with them as well and follow along at different points as well. See, someone's typing away there. Fantastic. So feel free to tell us what your opinions of what culture is. I'm just going to drop in the workbook for everybody here. Perfect. That is your workbook. Common way of being. I love it. Fantastic. Any other thoughts on what culture is? What drives employees makes them your team and the vibe of a company. I like that. I love the word vibe. I'm sure there's there is a lot more. And ultimately, when it comes to culture, culture truly transcends between a few different areas. It's not just culture at work. It's also about culture within your friend groups, within your social groups, perhaps sporting teams. Culture is a very fluid entity, and it can relate to a number of different aspects. So all these topics that we'll dive into today will really be transferable to a few different areas, personally and professionally. The way that we look at it is culture is the ecosystem of shared values, beliefs, and behaviors. If we look at cultural groups such as populations and countries, we see that there are shared values and beliefs and behaviors. We look at cultural holidays. They are different from different places around the world, but they're to be a shared system of values and beliefs, which then also relates to our businesses as well. When we have a strong alignment within our core values and beliefs, our teams are more effective in delivering their goals because they're all traveling in that same direction. Culture is also shaped by the worst behavior we are willing to accept. And this is a big aspect that many people unfortunately overlook or don't spend enough time focusing on, is the idea that what we accept is quite often going to drive the actual culture in our organization. Culture is what people do when no one is looking. It's the best cultures are deliberately grown and not accidentally allowed. And this top point right here, this is going to be very, a very common thread through what we talk about today, especially as we relate this topic of culture to ecosystems and growing. It's what we deliberately grow. It's the environment that supports the growth and needs of that community. Culture brings a group of people, friends, family, co-workers, and aligns their goals to creative design. So ultimately, culture is an ecosystem. Culture is an environment. It's a vibe. And one of the things that I personally, have a hard time with, but it is very true, is that there are no good or bad cultures. There are only cultures that are truly beneficial for the individual there within. And different cultures are going to support different individuals and are going to hinder others. So when we look at different organizations, we might look at them and say that is a toxic, culture. It could be toxic to us. It could be toxic to the people within it, but what they're trying to create would support the goals of others. So it's important to recognize that different organizations, friend groups, cultural groups all together, that there are variations between them all. And it's important to find the cultural values that support our growth in the most successful way possible. Because we want to ensure that the space that we are in is going to support the growth of ourselves, our team, and our business as we look at this through a business lens. Now, the ecology of culture. As mentioned, this has been a topic that I've been working on for many years. I started to explore this through all my studies at university and realized that there are similarities between the natural world and how culture within organizations operates. And I want to use a little bit of a case study to show the importance of culture. It's sometimes hard for us to quantify if a culture is good or bad, how much money we should invest within a culture. But there are a number of great case studies, and the first one, the one we're going to look at today, is actually about the summer camp that I grew up going to, because this really amplifies the importance of culture. And we use a topic which is called, or we use a theme called 7 Days or Bust. And that was the driving focus. And this photo here on the slide, this is the camp that I actually used to run and spent many of my lives. Oh, sorry, I've gone one slide too far. Many of the years going to myself. Now, the way summer camps work, and this is important to understand the 7 Days or Bust, is in North America, we have two uninterrupted months of holidays, July and August. In Canada, there's one public holiday. In the US, there's one public holiday. But ultimately, there's 2 months of nothingness. So a lot of the families send their little people away to camps. Now, many of these summer camps, and there are thousands across the country, many of them only operate for 2 months of the year, maybe three. And throughout the rest of the year, they are on a skeleton staff, perhaps just the owner or the owner's family. They're the only ones who are working on trying to get people to book in and come to the camp for that summer. So, in essence, these businesses shut down and they are typically on large plots of land. So, there's still going to be taxes and utilities and everything, but the business doesn't really do much throughout the year, and it's really only active for the 2 months. Now, the 1 week before the kids would arrive, and it was literally 1 week beforehand, the staff would turn up for what we would call training week. Training week, the staff would turn up on the Sunday, and then the following Sunday the kids would be there. So you had 7 days to really do this well. We would have a large number of staff, and you can see from this photo, this is a staff photo from a few years ago. This is the number of people that it took to operate the camp. The majority of these individuals would come together on one day, and depending on the year, perhaps 50, 60% were return staff or campers who became staff. But for the most part, these were new individuals who may have never met one another. They were required to all of a sudden live and work together for an extended period of time, and they were, facing a lot of challenges. We needed them to not only understand their role, but we needed them to truly understand the value of the space that we were creating. We had 7 days to ensure that they knew all the safety rules, they knew how to operate their programs, they knew the timing, so that in 7 days when the kids would arrive, everything would work perfectly, because we needed to ensure that the next 2 months, the kids had the most amazing time possible. So at the end of their stay, be it 1, 2, or 4 weeks, the kids would book in again. The customer would say, that was amazing. I want it again. Here's my money for next year. 12 months time, I want to be back. But we had 1 week to achieve that level of success. So our focus on the first 3 days was exclusively culture and team development. We needed this entire group of young individuals, these young adults, to connect and to learn to trust and understand each other, and to understand that the environment that we were building was going to support not only them, but the campers who were coming a week later. We put all of our faith within 3 days of building just culture, so that we could then work on the other skills, so that when the kids would arrive, the business would go off with a hitch. And just think about that for a moment. We invested so much time on culture because we knew that if the culture was broken, the culture wasn't right, no matter what we did when the kids arrived, they were not going to book the next year. And we needed kids to book and pay for a deposit to keep the business open for the rest of the year. There was times where the culture was off because it's not always perfect, and we would see a low take up for the following year. That meant that we knew for the next 10 months the business would struggle and summer camp would be impacted the next year because we were having a low return repeat clients. Culture was the underlying factor that allowed us to grow the business. Culture was the factor that made kids feel safe, happy, and supported because they were the customers, that when they finished their stay, within an hour, their parents were then booking them in again for the next year, putting deposit down for the same or a longer amount of time. Now, many organizations, on the other hand, we don't spend maybe a day even looking at culture with our new employees. If we're lucky, we'll have a cultural handbook, we'll have culture guidelines, we'll have a culture plan within an organization, but we'll give that to them in a handbook. We may briefly, go over it in their induction, maybe part of the interview, but then we just hope that everything works for itself. We spend very little, typically many organizations spend very little time on their actual culture development of their team. That, you know, we are focusing on different aspects, and if the culture fails within an organization, we've all most likely experienced it being part of a negative culture. It impacts our performance. So it's time that we start considering the growth that we need to experience within our teams, and to invest a bit more time into ensuring that our people, when they become part of our team, that they understand the culture, they recognize what this environment is and how they fit in, how they can shape the environment, and how they can better it for all. Now, getting into the science of this is quite important, because there's a growth pattern within our culture. Now, an ecosystem first begins with a creature like this. This is the start of anything. This is what's known as a lichen. It's kind of like a moss, and it will grow where nothing's grown before. And I consider this like a founder, a visionary, someone who says, there's something here. I can make this into something. Those individuals start where there's nothing, and they lay the groundwork for what is to come. Many of us work for organizations that have founders who have a vision story, a visionary story, perhaps. And it's these individuals who set the framework for what the culture is going to be. And over time, different species are going to join into our environment that are going to help shape the direction. But it's the founding species that's going to really set the tone. So if we have a founder who's very driven on fast-paced, high energy, fast sales, they're going to create the foundation for an environment that's going to suit species that also thrive in a similar space to that as well. Now, over time, there is a change within the actual science itself. So we see different species. So again, we begin off with a bare rock. There is nothing here. This is the science aspect of how it all ties in. So we have the bare rock of vacant space. This is the industry potential. And someone comes along, the founder, the visionary, the lichen and moss, and they set the groundwork. Through their hard work and through their investment of time and energy, we then welcome in new species. This is our typically, consider that like our grasses and herbs. They become our first team members. And it's thanks to the hard work of the founder and visionary, which will create the space to allow those. Now, the founder and the visionary, these species here, when they first come into play, they're going to really set the tone for what is going to be supported. Not all grasses and not all herbs are going to grow in the space the founder is within. Only the right ones. And then over time, if we manage the space, we then get our team growth, get more individuals, we get some larger plants come into this system, and then more individuals, some short tenured team members join us along the way. We consider those our young trees, and then our mature species. So there's actually a growth pattern within an ecosystem, and same within our teams as well. We start off with nothing, then the founder and visionary comes in and sets the tone. And then we get our first team members, and then the growth, because as each of these sections grow, we leave parts of ourselves behind. So the founder and visionary leaves part of themselves behind, which then leaves space for the new team members, which then makes space for the growth, which then makes space for the tenured employees. So each portion of these will shape and leave an impact to the actual environment, which is going to actually create the success for ourselves moving forward. But why does culture matter? Culture, as we've touched on a little bit already, culture, it drives performance. It boosts retention, it fosters innovation, it protects and sets reputations as well. But I would like to know from you, feel free with the chat. I would love to know, why do you value culture at your place of work or within your personal life? You know, why does it have an importance to you? Feel free to open the chat box and tell us why you believe, why you value culture. We had a few people leave some chats earlier. Thank you again. I love it. It's always important to keep people with similar values in your circle, personal and work, 100%. It's all about creating that healthy environment that supports one another, connects employees, 100%. Lovely to see you. You're right. Culture, it drives performance. And again, when we look at these aspects, so within the service industry, it's key for culture to ensure you are delivering the same service each time. 100%. These are all very key factors of why culture matters. It sets the tone, it sets the vibe of the space, and it also sets the ecosystem that supports the growth of the individuals within it. A positive culture sets a scene for customers, 100%. And that's great. Yeah, you're a completely virtual firm, so it's very important to keep everyone connected. It's very key, especially within the virtual space. Having a great culture in that virtual space is really important, because we still need to ensure that the same messages and theme and that vibe is consistent throughout all of our engagements with clients and suppliers, regardless of that virtual. Helps align to get work done, understand purpose, shared/agreed values, 100%. And this is why it's really important to understand what our culture is, because you know what your values are might be different to my values. Doesn't mean necessarily yours or mine are better or worse. However, we need to ensure that the culture, that space, is going to support each other. If we have conflicting values, if I focus more on myself rather than a team success, well, we have a conflict of values, meaning that the ecosystem that I'm a part of, maybe I don't fit into that. And as mentioned earlier, I said that there's not necessarily good or bad cultures, as cultures that support different individuals. And again, if we look back at this one here, if we were to consider, changing these diagrams to a desert theme, we're not going to see trees like this or shrubs like this. We're going to see different species altogether. It's not saying that one is better than the other. However, the environment supports different individuals. That's amazing to hear that you've established a better, strong culture within your online team than our in-person team. And I do believe a lot of people, a lot of companies are realizing the disconnect within the online presence and are actually investing a bit more time within that, because they're so, focused on creating that connection, because there's that physical divide where before we hoped that due to the closeness, that physical proximity, that things would happen organically. As I mentioned, earlier, typically we see individuals being onboarded within a company. We briefly cover the topic and hope they fall into line. Where now, when we have a more virtual space, people are spending a bit more time getting the culture right, because they can't hope that the individuals are going to find the right culture fits within that physical space, because that no longer applies to them. So well done on you for creating that amazing culture within the virtual space, because it is quite challenging. So I want you to treat your culture as a garden. This is where the whole ecology and plant analogy is going to come into place. If anyone has a garden at home, you know how you need to be mindful of what you're planting and where you're planting. And because of that, I want you to plan before you plant. Culture cannot be left to chance. You must design it. Your vision matters. And the way I like to consider that is, if we look at this garden here, we can see different species are planted in different areas because they are supportive of one another. And we're also being strategic with what we plant. If I don't like, coriander, perhaps I'm not going to plant it in my garden. Or if I like mint, I need to be understanding of how mint grows and the impacts of how and where I plant it. And mint is an amazing example of being proactive with where and how we plant or bring individuals within our space. With mint, fast growing and spreads really quickly. Nothing wrong with it. However, I don't want to plant it in my main garden bed because it can take over. So I'll plant it in somewhere safe and secure where it's not going to spread. We might have team members who are very out there, perhaps a bit overpowering at times. There may be nothing wrong with them. However, it's important that we strategically place them in the right cultural locations for them where they can thrive and support the entire environment, which is why it's really important for us to plan before we plant. We need to know which individuals are going to grow faster, grow slower, which ones are going to be more supportive, which ones thrive in different environments. And within an organization, our different teams are going to have the need to rely on different species or different team members at different times. Some people are going to be more shade tolerant and they're going to thrive underneath something taller and bigger. Again, we're planning before we plant. So I would love to, hear from you. Tell me, what is your current culture versus what do you want to grow? And if you could start from scratch, what would you plant, or what would you avoid and why? It's a little self-reflection. So if you're interested in sharing, I'd love to know, if there's anything within your current culture you'd like to see change, what you would do differently if you could start fresh, perhaps personalities or behaviors you'd seek out or avoid. It's okay if no one wants to share. It's a bit of a telling one, this one. So there is a section within your workbook where you can start breaking these down and doing some self-reflection. So I do recommend um, taking the time to review the workbook and going through some of those stages as well. That's a great one. I'd love to be able to manage the culture around the way young workers show up at work. That's fantastic. And understanding their needs is a fantastic way to start that process as well. Finding out what's going to support them, but also setting the stage as well for what the environment is. Because, again, we'll talk a bit about tenured and newer team members later on in the class today. But, there is a big difference within the change of tenure within individuals. Anyone else like to share anything? And if not, please just make sure that you at some point you do, work through the workbook at a point in time. That way you can reflect on what you would do differently, what you want to grow. If you could start from scratch, what you want to plant, what would you want to avoid? You might find that your culture originally started off perhaps more focused around care and then evolved into something, and you wish you could go back and remove that certain behavior at one point to avoid that change, because again, what we promote or what we allow into our garden is going to change it. If I never meant to plant mint in the main garden bed, removing it's a lot more work. So being mindful of what things we should have avoided, because if we can recognize the behaviors that we don't want to see anymore, we can hopefully avoid future ones. Nice to build the build idea of the team instead of the focus on the individual that many younger staff seem to favor. 100%. There's definitely a lot of differential generations of the younger ones, trying to focus on the me rather than the we. But we can also see that within the individuals, regardless of age, who are perhaps threatened or feel insecure or unsafe in the environment as well. When we see a lot of people focusing on the me rather than the we, what we often find is that it's a defense mechanism, like food hoarding in dogs and animals. they're threatened that someone's going to take something away. So they're focusing on self-preservation rather than looking at the good. And that can be a personal, thing that they've come from a previous environment that focused on that, or perhaps, something within the team is making them feel insecure about themselves. So it's a really good idea to be able to explore that to figure out, what the cause of that me versus we focus. And I said, quite often we find it is that lack of feeling safe. And that can be also geopolitical impacts as well, markets, cost of living, those things can always impact individuals. But being mindful of that will help you shape your cultures along the way. So when we start to plant with care and do it not for show, and this is where we find a lot of organizations rush into things and start making mistakes. We have an employee leave, a plant falls down, we have a barren space, and we quickly need to fill it. Or we want to show traction really quickly, so we rush to fill space. We plant things that are going to, grow and be really big and bushy. However, they're not what we want. Again, going back to the mint analogy, planting mint, it grows fast, it grows big, there's a lot of show. But if you don't like mint and you don't want it everywhere, it's not the right thing to plant. So we need to plant with care and recognize that, a healthy ecosystem does take time to get the process started. But then once managed, it becomes almost self-maintaining, so long as we observe for any toxicity or invasive species, which we'll touch on. So every new program, person, or ritual should serve a purpose, not just filling a space, but they should fit in and they should serve a true purpose within that role, within that cultural space. Again, the mint chaos, we don't want just to throw things in there. We want to ensure that we're not focusing on the busyness. Look at all these new employees we brought in to fill space. We want purpose-driven action. And it can be challenging when we have a high demand and we need people to carry the workload. However, if we hastily bring people in which are not the right cultural fits, that don't fit in to the organization, it's going to cost us more time later on as we have to remove perhaps that weed, that plant, that individual from the space, and it's going to cost us more versus finding the right individuals. Retaining the right individuals is a more cost-effective process on us growing that culture, and it's going to be more effective, and we're going to have a more purpose-driven result. Snap decisions, snap your quality. So again, if we're hiring individuals at speed and we're not focused on are they the right fit for us or are we not the right fit for them, those rush decisions are going to cost us. So we always recommend that when it comes time to growing your team, be mindful, be purposeful. Where is this individual going to be in 5 years' time? How is this plant going to grow? Are they going to grow big? Are they grow small? Do they grow fast? Do they grow, however it might be? We need to be purposeful in our action so that as the team joins and the team grows, we have a healthy environment that suits the end goal. Because again, with us designing our garden, there's an activity within the workshop, the workbook as well that you can do. We want to address what we want. What are we going to see in 5 years' time? How do we achieve that end goal? If I hate tomatoes, I'm not going to plant tomatoes today because I'm going to have tomatoes in 5 years' time. That's counterintuitive to what I want. I'm going to focus on planting what I want so that as they grow, we're going to have the desired outcome rather than having to go back, rip everything out, and start fresh once again. So what happens when you plant for show? Does anyone have any examples or stories, perhaps themselves, when, perhaps, people, you were hired into the wrong environments where, people rushed into filling space? We had one where at one of the camps I ran for years, where we were desperate for staff that we were hiring absolutely anybody and everybody. And Very quickly, within the first few days, we realized that the snap decision we made, all those individuals we worked countless hours on quickly hiring, were ill fit and ill prepared, and it impacted the wellness of the rest of the team. And then we had to let multiple people go because we had made the poor decision on inviting the wrong individuals within the space. It wasn't them. And this is something that I'm a big believer in when it comes to making decisions on who you bring into your culture, who you plant where. You are making a decision, and you need to respect that you might plant the wrong things at times, and we need to reflect and review and learn from that. And we definitely learned that we need to be more calculated. This is a center here in Australia, and focus on hiring the right people, not just hiring bodies, because when you hire a body, you just get that, you don't hire the right individual. Go persevere. So we had a small business where a boss hired a manager because the business coach told him that was our next step. But thinking we had a manager, he stepped away from the business and left her and to run everything. Terrible decision. Fantastic. Yep, 100%. Taking outside opinion is not always the right thing. It's always important to be mindful of your situations. And that's why I say, there's no right or wrong culture. I thrive in a particular culture. You'll thrive in a different culture. They may not be the same, so it's important to recognize that. Early 2024, we need a quick replace several team members. 3 to 4 were not a good fit. It took over a year to recover, 100%. And if we look at this in the scientific space within plants, if we plant something that is a fast-growing tree that has a large canopy, it will grow really fast, and it's going to then hog all the light and stunt the growth of everything below. But all those things below, they may need more light to actually grow. So that new thing we planted, whilst there is that fast, snap decision, we got that big movement, we got that busyness, it's actually negatively impacting all those other plants. So then we have to go through, remove that, and then we cause harm and shock to the others. It takes time for them to recover. And like you said, it took over a year to recover. And when you have a toxic or wrong fit individual within your culture, there is a ripple effect for a very long period of time. Losing trust is hard to earn back. It's not something you are given freely. It takes time to earn that trust, earn that respect. And by making these snap decisions and these ill-planned actions, we can negatively impact the team. Trust is broken, confidence is broken, and people become rudderless when they see actions which go against culture. And then it makes them unsure about where and what to do. So when it comes time to design your garden, which is within the workbook there, what do you refuse to allow to grow in your garden? And this is going to be different for different environments and different organizations. What values and ethics support your end goal? How will you nurture and protect your plants? What plant person suits the environment you're creating? Okay, we talked about it earlier where we have, different species. A desert will have different species versus a boreal forest versus a rainforest versus a temperate forest. So it's important to recognize we need to design for the future. So we need to start with our end goal. So in 5 years' time, and many of you may be in the process of making some cultural changes within your organization now. So within 5 years' time, what are you looking to achieve? Are you looking to have a fast-paced, cutthroat environment? I'm not here to judge. If so, when you start putting people in place that are going to support the growth over time, how do we nurture that? What values do we take? Or are we looking for an environment that's going to be supportive and creative and trustworthy? What actions are we going to accept today, and what are we not going to accept? What behaviors and values and ethics are we not going to permit within our garden? Because what we permit, we're going to promote. So it's important to have our standards and set those expectations for ourselves to make sure that we can manage that and create that healthy, safe environment. And I would strongly advise you to spend some time to review the garden you're designing. And it could be today, it could be tomorrow, but consider what you're going to do. Now, Invasive species. This is a very important one. Now, invasive species, ultimately, they don't fit that particular space. And this is where we come in, where we had some people comment earlier about them hiring the wrong people. If we look at the red fox, for example, it's considered invasive species here. It was a snap decision where we brought in something to do a job, but then the environment did not support that species, and we have a ramification down the line where things are changing. So it's important for us to recognize when we bring in the wrong people that we need to deal with those ramifications, or we need to focus on bringing the right individuals in the space. And a thing that I find some individuals struggle with is that there's nothing wrong with the red fox. It just doesn't belong in that space. So it's important to recognize when someone is in the wrong environments, because if we are bringing the wrong individuals into that set environment, we are most likely looking to stunt their growth. And invasive species, they thrive somewhere, so we need to ensure that they are in the most suitable, healthy environment for themselves. So it's really important to be mindful that not everything is going to thrive in all environments. Not every individual is going to fit your culture. And if you brought them into your culture, we need to take responsibility for those actions. Again, each garden is unique, and it's important to recognize that. Now, when it comes to weeding our garden, you are the first line of defense. So you need to defend your space. What are you willing to come into your space? What behaviors, values are you not going to allow to grow? That cliche expression, see something, say something, you weed on site. If you're walking through and you see that first weed, we have to address it right then and there. Otherwise, weeds grow very quickly and they will spread throughout your organization. Because when your team members see you accept something, they're going to believe you promote that. If you are trying to promote a culture of safety, that every time you turn around, you're not wearing your hard hat, your high vis, well, their team members don't believe you actually value that. Or if you never pull somebody up who's never wearing the safety equipment, they're going to see that and say, well, if that behavior is accepted, that is okay to do. So it's important for us to defend our values and ethics to create that successful culture and to address those portions. Now, when we look at the toxicity within a garden, this is when we have the wrong plants, the wrong species, invasive species coming in. We can see things become stunted. They under yield, so not producing as much fruit. The root system's crowded. Disease spreads very easily. The growth is impacted. Pests invade. They start competing. It's not a great outcome. And this is how we see toxicity within an actual garden itself. When we start looking at toxicity within an environment of teams, we start seeing the physical, health of our team members decline. We start seeing a high staff turnover. It's that leaf dieback. The reputation becomes damaged because we have that high staff turnover, or we have that reputation of being that negative space. Creativity stalls. When we have toxicity within our culture, we start losing that sense of trust and that safety. So creativity, social impacts. There are studies that show that where we have organizations of high impact that are very toxic, there's higher rates of alcohol abuse or substance abuse within that area. So actual social impacts of a toxic workplace, increased absenteeism, performance collapse, low engagement. These are all factors that impact the bottom line of an organization. And this is why we need to have a culture that protects itself and stops this toxicity from coming in by having individuals who are known as our culture guardians, like our gardeners. What you accept, you promote. When something takes root, you have to rip it out right away. So don't allow anything just to go willy-nilly passing by. You are responsible for protecting your environment, for gardening. Your job is, you're the head landscaper. You need to make sure that everyone is where they're supposed to be, that the plants are growing the best way. See something, do something. Again, it's early prevention is going to save a lot more time to protect us all in that space. Now, as we near the end today, as I'm getting closer to your time, I want to be very respectful of your time today for everyone. There is the impacts of old growth. So these are individuals who've been within our organization for a long period of time. They're tenured. However, there are some pros and cons to said individuals. They block the sunlight and they restrict new growth. Their canopy takes up so much space that all the focus goes to them. New ideas are being bounced. Everyone turns to that individual. We wait for someone to speak first. It's to that tenured individual. They're also slow to change. They're very comfortable with their current position, and they change the environment to suit their needs regardless of what's required. So there's a lot of pros and cons of older species, older individuals. However, it's important to recognize when they're no longer fitting the cultural needs. Over time, all cultures change, environments are changing, and at one point, perhaps those old growth individuals are no longer serving that space and perhaps need to be transplanted somewhere else, or maybe they need to be moved to an environment where they're most successful too. But on the other hand, when one of those individuals does leave, when the old guard falls, for the first time, sunlight reaches those new and upcomers, those people who are never allowed to speak because the conversation always went to the older, more tenured individuals first. There's energy, they're fast to grow, they're fast to improve, they got a burst of energy, they've been held back for long enough, they're now given the opportunity, and boom, they're going to give you all they've got. They may be gone, but they're not going to be forgotten. They've left their mark. You can see when a tree falls down, it still shapes the environment. What they've done in the past is still positively going to support the individuals. It's not like poof, they're gone. There's going to be remnants, a scar remains, so there's going to be impact from them future on. And it's going to change it's going to change the passions, ideas, energy improvements. When one of them leaves, there's going to be it's going to be a physical change within the team. There's going to be a big cultural change, but it's not a negative aspect. It's going to allow for a lot of growth and positivity. So we need to accept that when someone tenured leaves, there's going to be a moment of discomfort. However, if we allow those stunted species or stunted trees to grow, they're going to showcase their full potential because now there's nothing holding them back. When it comes to creating culture change, again, I'm trying to get through these last few things quite quickly. I do apologize. As mentioned, we usually go through this in detail over a few days through sort of leadership retreats. So creating culture change, vocalize the plan, the vision, and the end goal. It's important that everybody knows where we are traveling towards. People may not like where they're going and they may choose to get off, but that is okay because, again, the environment we're traveling towards is no longer fitting their needs and no longer servicing them. So it's going to be better for them to leave so we can find the right individuals to join us. Assess the current plants, individuals for future gardens. Are these the right people in the right space for where we are going? Accept change is coming. Change is hard, and not all plants or individuals will remain. Some will struggle to change and some will fall over. And it's important to accept that and recognize that if this new culture is what we need, not everyone's going to fit that mold, and it's okay. And again, act with purpose. I cannot hear the words you say because of the things you do. It's a great expression I've heard recently. So it's important that, our actions reflect the words we are saying. If we want people to have an open door policy, you need to have an open door policy as well. It takes time, but ensure that you are purposeful with your actions, travel in the right direction, and vocalize our plans. So your culture, your choice. What will your culture be? Again, we're looking at that 5-year plan, that 10-year plan. What will you not accept in your garden? What is the ideal individual for the tomorrow garden? Do you fit these standards? Would you be the right fit? Recognizing that is a great opportunity to do self-reflection and self-improvement ourselves, or perhaps we need to change our own personal journey or change the culture. We might love a certain culture we've heard about, but if we don't fit that, then we're not the right individuals to lead us towards that culture, or we need to find a more suitable space. Clearly articulate the culture to be, ensure all parties are traveling together. This is a big part. We need to really understand that everyone needs to hear what we're doing so that we can set some goals and travel together. Don't bend our standards. Be the cultural guardian. Don't simply plant things for the sake of it. Be purposeful in your action and ensure that we're bringing the right individuals in. Act early, act often. If all of a sudden a plant is growing too wild, trim it back, replant people, move them around, find the right species, act early. It's much easier to pull out this, a small sprout of a plant versus a long-standing tree. So it's important to act early. and nurture, support, and continue to grow. It is an ongoing cycle within that. Lastly, as we wrap up just on time, as I was hoping to, plant today for your garden of tomorrow. So what we're planting today needs to service our end needs. Now, very lastly, I like to always end with this little calculation to help all of us understand how we can truly visualize and exercise within the cultural space. Culture equals positive or negative action over time repeated. When we break down what culture is, this is a great formula to allow us to make those actions. So if our culture is always ignoring new standards over time and repeat that, well, that's our culture. If our culture is about being supportive, creative, and nurturing, and we do that action over time, repeat that, that is our culture. So it's all about understanding the positive or the negative actions, what we're going to accept, repeat that over time, or repeat over again and again, and we'll get our culture itself. I do thank you all for coming along today. I know it's a fair bit, so I usually cram this into a few days. So I've done my very best to condense as much as I possibly could into the ecology of culture. But again, it's all about planting for tomorrow and being mindful of the end goals of what we want. If anyone does have any questions, please feel free to pop them in the chat. I do very much appreciate your time in coming along today. I know it's culture is a very big thing. Thank you so much for making the time, for being here, your kind words. Again, for all those who registered, you'll receive a copy of the recording as well. So you'll be receiving that, and everyone who's live as well across the different platforms, you'll be receiving those again. My pleasure. Thank you so much for coming along. Again, ultimately, I can't stress enough, when we're looking at our culture, look at the future. What are we going to have? And then reverse engineers. If you're really looking for, a safe, happy environment, we need to reverse engineer that. Going for a cutthroat one, reverse engineer that. I can't tell you what the right culture is. I can tell you what supports individuals the best way possible. And that'd be absolutely fantastic. Stacey, I'll make sure you can share that as well. Thank you. Thank you all for attending. I do really appreciate that. Please make sure you grab that copy of the workbook as well. I will see if I can drop that in again for you here. If not, it is there earlier, and I'll make sure to send it out to everybody. So thank you all for your time today. I do appreciate it. And I wish you all the best. Any questions, please feel free to reach out. And thank you for your time. Bye, everybody.